Hey friends, it's been a while since I did an Ocean Talks episode. I've been out traveling quite a bit over the last several weeks. In fact, I've been traveling through South Africa and Mexico, spending time on the water filming sharks, whales, orcas, and some of the most fascinating marine wildlife encounters I've seen yet. But ever since I got back, sharks have been in the headlines constantly. Whether it's the shark attacks that have been reported in Australia, and unfortunately there have been a lot, I'll dedicate a full episode to that in the future, or the recent viral encounters filmed in Southern California, there has not been a shortage of sharks in the news. But I want to highlight three specific stories that have caught my interest. First, there's a proposed shark diving ban in Florida that continues to spark debate. Secondly, a great white was filmed underwater in the Mediterranean Sea. That's a story that's made world news. I'm sure you guys have heard of it. And thirdly, there's reports out of Asia that have once again ignited a discussion about whether great white sharks belong in aquariums at all. At first glance, these stories seem unrelated, but they all touch on something much bigger, a question that is much bigger. How should humans interact with one of the ocean's most misunderstood predators? First up, let's go to Florida. A proposed measure known as the Florida Safe Seas Act would prohibit shark feeding associated with shark diving and shark snorkeling activities in federal waters. Now, supporters argue the legislation improves public safety and may help address shark depredation, a growing concern among fishermen when sharks take fish from hooked lines before they can be landed. Now, critics say it could significantly impact shark ecotourism, education, and research. What's interesting about this proposal is who's supporting it and why. The legislation was introduced by Florida Congressman Daniel Webster and has received support from a significant portion of Florida's recreational fishing community. Many of those fishermen have become increasingly frustrated by shark depredation. In simple terms, they're losing fish to sharks before they can reel them in. Supporters of the bill argue that shark feeding conducted during dive operations conditions sharks to associate boats with food and may contribute to the problem. But most marine scientists, shark researchers, and dive operators point out that there is currently little to no scientific evidence showing that regulated shark diving operations occurring miles offshore are making Florida beaches more dangerous. In fact, the shark diving operations being discussed typically occur more than 3 miles offshore, well away from recreational swimming areas. And that's where the debate becomes particularly interesting, because if the science doesn't clearly demonstrate a public safety problem, is it fair to ask another question? Is this really a public safety issue? Or is it a conflict between two very different ways of interacting with sharks? On one side, you have a growing shark tourism industry built around keeping sharks alive, photographing them, filming them, studying them, and generating economic value through ecotourism. On the other side, you have fishing interests increasingly concerned about sharks taking fish from their lines and ultimately impacting their fishing experience on the water. Neither side sees the issue the same way, and that's why this debate has become so contentious. Now, before I go any further, I should probably disclose something. Long before I was filming sharks from drones or documenting them for television, I was an avid fisherman. In fact, years ago, I caught this 7-foot thresher shark off the coast of Malibu from my balcony in my then home. At the time, I viewed sharks very differently than I do today. I understand the fishing perspective because I used to be part of it. But after spending thousands of hours observing sharks in the wild, documenting their behavior, and working alongside researchers around the world, my perspective evolved. And that's one of the reasons I find this debate so interesting, because I spent time on both sides of it. A few years ago, I traveled to Florida and documented something very different. Not shark diving, not shark ecotourism, but the recreational killing of bull sharks. What I witnessed wasn't easy to watch. At one point, fishermen even attempted to bring down my drone while I was documenting what was happening. The images of mutilated sharks spoke for themselves. And these are people that are supporting this measure. What creates more value for sharks? A shark that's photographed, filmed, and appreciated alive, or a shark that's killed for recreation? Personally, I think education plays an important role in conservation. Most people who fear sharks have never actually spent time observing them. Whether it's through diving, underwater research, underwater filming, or even drone footage from above, understanding often replaces fear. That doesn't mean every interaction with wildlife is appropriate, but it does mean we should be careful when making decisions based on assumptions rather than evidence. What we do know is that a shark striking a fish in distress is only doing what it's programmed to do through DNA. One could easily question whether there are too many anglers catching fish, thus associating a boat with an easy meal. The challenge is finding the balance between conservation, education, public safety, tourism, and responsible wildlife interaction. And before anyone lights up the comment section, remember, I'm not asking you to agree with me. I'm discussing a topic that's currently being debated and sharing what I personally witnessed while documenting sharks in Florida. The photographs are real, the footage is real, and the questions surrounding the issue are real. What you do with that information is entirely up to you. Okay, for our second story, we're going to look at the great white shark that was filmed in the Mediterranean. A couple weeks ago, divers working to remove abandoned fishing gear in the Strait of Sicily captured what is believed to be the first underwater footage of a great white in the Mediterranean Sea. This encounter happened at a shipwreck roughly 130 feet below the surface. The shark approached briefly before disappearing back into the blue. Now, this made world headlines. It was all over the place. Many outlets treated this as if the great white suddenly appeared in the Mediterranean for the first time. In fact, there were several articles that had that title, Mediterranean Shark First Time. That's actually not the actual story. Far from it. Great whites have been documented in the Mediterranean for centuries. Scientists have long known they occur there, especially around the Strait of Sicily. What makes this encounter remarkable is not that a white shark was present. It's that underwater footage of one is incredibly rare. In fact, Mediterranean great whites are believed to represent one of the most vulnerable populations of white sharks on Earth. Researchers think only a relatively small number remain, making encounters like this exceptionally uncommon. For me, the most interesting part isn't that a white shark was there. It's that despite decades of fishing pressure, maritime traffic, and habitat changes, these sharks are somehow still hanging on. Sometimes, a single piece of footage becomes a reminder that a species hasn't disappeared quite yet, and that in itself is important. It's also a reason why I plan to head over to the Mediterranean in the future. The final story comes from Asia, where reports of a great white being held on display have once again sparked debate across the shark community. A great white was kept in an aquarium in South Korea for a short time before the owner allegedly released it. Now, it wasn't covered worldwide with the major press outlets, but according to the Korea Herald, the cafe owner said the shark was fine until viral attention, flash photography caused it to stress out, and so he released it. Although many on social media claim the shark to have died. According to the report, the cafe owner said he had rescued the 1.5-meter shark from a fish market in a nearby Gampu on May 30th. Now, according to the report, the shark was released on June 2nd, earlier than planned, after the photos went viral and people began reporting the case to authorities. Now, whenever a great white ends up behind glass, the same question immediately follows. Can these animals actually survive in captivity? The simple answer is no. And historically, there has been no precedence for a shark surviving a long period of time behind glass. Even facilities with enormous resources have struggled to keep them alive for extended periods. Perhaps the most famous example occurred in Japan in 2016 when an adult white shark was displayed at the Okinawa Aquarium. The shark died just 3 days later. Years earlier, Monterey Bay Aquarium achieved something no one else had managed by successfully housing juvenile white sharks for limited periods before releasing them back into the wild, although some of them died shortly thereafter. But even the Monterey Aquarium eventually concluded that the research objectives had been met and stopped exhibiting white sharks altogether. For me, the debate says less about aquariums and more about the sharks themselves. The more we learn about great whites, the more we realize they're built for an entirely different scale of existence. These are animals capable of crossing entire ocean basins. Some travel thousands of miles in a single year, Heck, when I was in South Africa, I spent time with a man that physically tagged Nicole, the famous shark that went from South Africa to Australia and back. Bottom line, these animals need space. Trying to contain that behavior inside a tank, even a very large tank, has repeatedly proven to be one of the greatest challenges in marine husbandry. And perhaps that's telling us something. Maybe some animals simply belong in the wild. What's interesting is that all three stories point in the same direction. The Mediterranean footage reminds us how little we still see of a great white in some parts of the world. The Florida debate forces us to consider how humans should interact with sharks responsibly. And the aquarium discussion highlights just how poorly these animals fit into captivity. For all the footage we've collected, all the tags we've deployed, and all the research that has been published, white sharks still have a remarkable ability to surprise us. And maybe that's part of what keeps many of us fascinated by them in the first place. I know it does me. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think shark diving should be restricted? Should great white sharks ever be kept in aquariums? And what do you think the future holds for the Mediterranean population? Let me know in the comments below. And I would really appreciate your subscription, your comments, and I'm not trying to force any opinions upon yourself. I'm just trying to give you the data, the observations that I make. If you enjoy this update, be sure to subscribe. And I'll keep bringing you real-world shark stories, field observations, and the latest developments from the world of shark science. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.